Tonight I have the honor and incredible privilege of introducing the first of the class of 2018 Bellwethers to be inducted tonight, Patrick E. Carroll, Jr. May he rest in peace, and we've already had the moment of silence, so I'll just proceed. Pat's being inducted tonight because he qualified with very high marks for this honor, but also because he kept running for re-election as an officer of the Bellwether League, and we have a policy that says you can't be a member of the board and be inducted unless you're off the board for 2 years. But every time he kept rerunning for it, he stopped any process that we could have had to induct him before now, but tonight is his night. So with that policy being considered, delayed a bit, but we're happy now that unfortunately he isn't here in person, but Pat was more interested in supporting the Bellwether League than he was in being honored by it. And that gives you a pretty good indication of the man that Pat Carroll was. I don't intend to read his resume, although I suggest there's information in our booklet and on our website, and I would urge you to read it. It's pretty impressive. But I'm going to tell you why, in addition to what I've just said, Pat's being inducted tonight. I've personally known Pat since the 1980s. We were both supply chain leaders at different hospitals. So we were colleagues. We talked about things that were going on. We also happened to be on an editorial board of a publication that has come and gone. It used to be called Hospital Materials Management. It was kind of a newsletter type thing. So that's how I really got to know him better. Our initial common ground and bond, so to speak, was our interest in baseball. And we would frequently call each other and talk about baseball and who's going to be inducted to the Hall of Fame that year and who's not. Well, we also had in common an affinity for a guy by the name of Willie Mays. Now, Willie, if you're probably less than 55 years old, you may never have even heard or know who Willie Mays is. Hall of Fame player. Started his career in New York, went to San Francisco, and that's when Pat got to know him a little bit better. So, after I had begun doing consulting, Pat got into it as well. He wasn't trying to copy me, trust me. But he started doing it, and we became competitors. Sometimes we were chasing the same client business. When I realized how good he was at what he did, we actually tried to get him to join our firm, our team. We thought it would be a great combination. For a variety of reasons, it didn't work out, but that's okay. We stayed friends and we talked a lot on the phone. And then, over a period of time, we were, I don't know how many years ago it was, we were on a call, certainly starting with the talk about baseball, and then we started to talk about business. This is maybe 10 years ago. We decided, hey, wonder what it would be like if we collaborated and did some work together. He happened to have had a client that he had won, happened to be based in Wisconsin, where I live, and said, hey, let's try it there. We did. It worked well. We were successful. So we did that a few more times. I got to learn firsthand how good Pat was. Pat was really good at what he did because of his knowledge, of his high ethics, his client-centric approach, his advocacy for supply chain principles, and his advocacy for the supply chain leaders who he was working with. Maybe not for, maybe it was the CFO, maybe it was the CEO, but he really tried to support the supply chain leaders who were in charge at that particular client location. Then during the nominating committee's deliberations on Pat's qualifications, one of our committee members came up with this line that sort of put it pretty succinctly in my head anyway, and I wrote it down. So even though Pat worked with all types and sizes of clients, particularly providers, hospitals, and IDNs, Pat was the champion of the supply chain leaders for the smaller hospitals, those that are there any big firm member consultants here tonight? That the big firms sort of neglected. They weren't interested in that business. It was too small, or whatever their rationale was. Pat took those jobs on. And he did his best to share that knowledge, to share that experience, to share that wisdom that he had gained over all those years and all those clients over those years. And so he could help the supply chain leader elevate how supply chain management was performing or operating at that particular facility. Maybe support that person to get into the C-suite or gain the C-suite's attention, and raise that level of performance to the level that in today's environment with what's going on in healthcare, that organization probably absolutely needed to stay alive. He was successful quite frequently, and by the way, quick note aside, no matter what you've heard, no consultant ever bats 1,000, and I'll use the baseball phrase because Pat would appreciate that. So he didn't have the perfect batting order, but nonetheless, he was successful a lot of that time. And I think a lot of that was also based on the fact that he had really good people skills. And so he connected, and with true affinity for, and I'll say empathy for those clients and those supply chain leaders that he worked with. So what I've described about Pat, to you, is this. Pat was actually known for this throughout the industry. And if you didn't know Pat, you didn't have that opportunity. If you did know Pat, you'd be saying the same things I'm saying right now. I'm sure that if we had an industry-wide vote for whether or not Pat belonged in the Bellwether League, they would have done the same thing our nominating committee did and said to everybody, Pat was a Bellwether, Pat should be a Bellwether, and we recognize him tonight for that honor. So without delay, I'd like to invite his wife, Faye, up to the stage so she can accept on his behalf the actual physical manifestation of this honor.
Pat said that this was going to be his last meeting. I'm sorry he couldn't be here, but I'm here for him. Thank you.